All right, I hope you got a good score on your first test, that you feel confident and you're ready to start preparing for exam number 2. This will be the tutorial for the practice exam number 2, which is going to be to prepare a loan schedule, but this loan will be significantly different than the last one you did. In this loan, we have a fixed principal amount. In the last loan, it was an amortizing loan where the payment amount was the same every month, and that payment had a different percentage of principal and interest inside of it. This payment will change every month, but will always have the same principal balance. So once you open up your worksheet, the first thing you always do is go to the file and save as, and you're going to save this as 232B. I'm using a name to reflect fixed, not payment, but principal payment loan calculator. And the habit I'd like you to get into is always put your name in the file. That's important because there's so many of you. I want to make sure that we keep these files separate. Now, take a moment to look at the Save As type. These are all of the various options you have to save as. You don't have to worry about downward compatibility, meaning you don't have to save this as a workbook that can be opened in Excel 97 through 2003, because I'm using Excel 2010. We're all on the same page. So just save this as an Excel workbook. That way it avoids that error message that you see at the end saying some of the functions might not work, and that always surprises some people. We avoid that error message by just saving as an Excel workbook. So once you're saved, and you know you can't lose your work, let's begin. Title of the spreadsheet should always be in bold and underline. Control B, Control U, learn your hotkeys, and then we're going to type fixed principal payment loan schedule. Okay? Remember that principal is spelled the P-A-L in the financial world, not P-L-E. So sometimes you might get past a spell check but still have used the word wrong. Next line is always in regular type, prepared by, put your name, prepared on, and put the date. And then in this box we're going to explain what we're doing. So we're going to have a purpose line. This spreadsheet prepares a schedule for a loan of selected duration and constant interest rate with a fixed monthly principal contribution. That looks good enough. Now remember, we click out of it, click back, click and drag. And let's go to column E. And once you've selected these columns, you'll recall we go to our wrap text, and then we're going to merge cells, and then we have to format it so that it's left justified, and then we take our cursor, we put it between the 4 and the 5 there on the very left hand side, and we shrink that row to size so that it looks just right. There we go. Now that's our opening section, but I want to teach you a new trick here for purposes of making it easier to go forward. Click on column A and then drag the mouse to the right until you've got all 5 columns highlighted. Now with the cursor anywhere in here, you can right click and it will give you these options. Go to column width, click on it. Right now you can see it's set at 8.43. That's the default. Let's just put that, let's just select 13. Okay, and if you put the 13 in there, it stretches it out for you. That way it's all even, perfectly set up, so that we have a little more room in which to work. So we have a blank line, and then on line 6 we're going to put our data section, Control B, Control U, data section, hit enter, then go back up Shift. We're going to drag it out to E, and we're going to put our color box. I think the blue works just fine for the data section. You can use any color as long as you're consistent. And then, because it's a section header, put the thick box border around it. And then we come down and let's do something a little bit different this time. Let's leave column A blank, and let's put our names in column B. And okay, typically we called it a home price, but these kind of loan calculators can be used for any asset purchase. So let's just call it the asset price, and then down here we'll have the down payment percentage, and then the down payment in dollars. And what we're trying to go for here is an amount financed. That could also be loan amount, or I just want you to use accurate labels. You don't have to do exactly the same, but they do have to be accurate for what they are. The interest rate, and remember, unless you say otherwise, an interest rate is always an annual rate. The loan period, and then we're going to have the monthly principal. Let's just call it monthly principal contribution. Okay. Now, naming the variables is very important, and I'd like to show you a little bit of a trick that you can use where Excel will automatically name these variables for you. So once you have your names all typed, go up to the top and move one column to your right. Okay? And from that column, go to the formula ribbon and type define name. And you'll find, I'll drag it up here for you, that the computer looked one column to the left, saw the header, and dragged it in for you. Asset underscore price. I did not type that. It was automatic. So I'll hit OK. Now I'll go down one. I'll hit define name. And it hit down payment. Now you'll recall it doesn't like to use special characters. So you're going to have to make a change to this one, and you're going to have to add percent. Hit enter. And you'll see why as we do the down payment dollars. You see how it gave the exact same name? You would have created a conflict. So even though the process is sped up a bit, you do have to watch out for these kind of variables that have similar names. So I can put down payment amount there. Amount financed isn't going to have any problem. Amount financed. Interest rate, the same, is not going to have any problem. Loan period, again, I just click on define name and these come right out. Monthly principal contribution. Look, it even saved the period there. I didn't think it could do that, but it can. Now, if you look, each of these cells in column C, starting with C8, asset price, has a name. And if I go to name manager, I can see that column C is indeed holding these named variables. I don't want them in column C because it's too close to the names and it'll cause formatting problems. So what I do is I hold the shift key down and I select all of those variables. I do a Control X, which is the cut command, Control X. And then I put the cursor on D8 and I hit Control V, which is paste. Now, when I go back to column C, look at the name box. These are not the variables. I've moved the name variables to column D. So now I can use column D, and it has all the variables I want in it. And if I go to name manager, which is always a good idea before you start filling up the numbers, I can check and see that they've moved to column D. Now this is an important tool to use because if, for example, you were doing a balance sheet or an income statement, you'd be typing variable names all day long. Just type once. Once you've typed your names here, then use the computer's functionality to name those variables for you. So let's do for the asset price, let's just throw in some numbers. Let's do 400,000. Down payment would be let's say 17%, and remember, a percentage before you format it has to be point something. Otherwise, when you format it as a percent, that's how you get those 1,000% numbers that sometimes people don't understand. Down payment is going to be calculated. Amount financed is going to be calculated. The interest rate, let's give it an 0.0625. That's the same as 6 1/4. I'm giving you an extra decimal to help you practice on the formatting. The loan period, let's just say 30 years, because we want it to be able to handle 30 years, and then we're going to do something different later on. The principal contribution is going to be calculated. So now let's go back up and do our calculations. The down payment for this asset purchase, could be a house, could be a piece of equipment, could be a car, is going to be calculated by putting an equal sign to tell that we're doing a formula. And then we can do use in formula, and we can say asset price, asterisk, down payment percent. And as you remember, there are other ways to get those figures. We'll do those next. So there's our down payment. The amount we're going to finance is going to be, and let's start with our equal sign. And this time, instead of using name manager, I can just click on it. Asset price minus the down payment amount. And I did that just by clicking on cells D8 and then D10. Now I hit enter. There's my amount financed. Now here's the part where in the previous spreadsheet we used a function called payment to do the calculus program, or the calculus problem, that divided up exactly what our monthly payment's going to be. This is going to be somewhat simpler. To do a steady principal contribution for a loan, start with the amount you're financing, and then divide it by the number of payments you're going to make, which is going to be 30 times 12, because we're talking about months, not years. And what that does is that cuts the amount financed into equal portions, and that's your fixed principal payment. Hopefully you get your mind around that right up front, because that's the major difference between exam 1 and exam 2. You're not using the payment function here. You're just dividing the amount financed into equal payments. Then we're going to calculate interest separately. So there's our monthly principal contribution. Okay, now let's highlight all of our variables. Let's center them first. Let's get them all formatted. Our asset price, we'll just make that currency. Our down payment is a percent. Down payments usually don't have decimal places. I've never seen a requirement in a loan that you do a 17.25% down payment, but if it did, you would just increase the amount of decimal places to show it. But here I think a round number is fine. Down payment, that's currency. Amount financed, that's currency. Interest rate is a percent. And there it rounded. We don't want it rounded. We want to make sure we show all of the information. We don't need 3 decimals. We'll just show the 2. 6.25%. And then of course this payment is going to be a currency. And remember, we always take and we make the cells that contain user entered information the same color as the data section bar. So holding control down, if I click on asset price and then click on down payment, I'm still holding the control button, and then click on interest rate and loan period, I've selected those. Now I can lift off my control. I can hit the paint bucket here, and there we go. Looks like principal contribution accidentally got selected. So if you need to undo that, you go to your paint bucket and you hit no fill. There we go. That is a complete data section. Everything we need is there, and we're ready to go and build our table. So Control B, Control U, answer section. Oops, did I type? Okay. And then click and drag, or hold the shift and move the arrows. Pick a color for your answer section. We could do a red maybe. Let's do the red. Let's put the box around it. There's our answer section. Now let's do our headings. Our headings are going to be month, and then we're going to have the payment. And we're going to have the interest, principal, and balance. And once we have those typed, let's select all of them and let's format them all at once. They're column headings, so they're bold and underlined, and they're centered in their boxes. There we go. So now we're ready to put our 0 month, and let's center that. And come over to our balance, and our balance is simply going to be to call down the amount financed, because that's what we're starting with. Let's format that as we go along. Okay, there's our cells. Now the month, you'll recall, we put the 1 and the 2. We hit Shift and open that box up. Alternatively, you could click and drag, but it's always better to learn to use the hotkeys on the keyboard. And then we click the autofill, and let's go down 360, just like we did on the prior one. 360. Okay, and as soon as we lift up, there's our months. And you'll see that odd format because I copied a format that was different. So all we're going to do is click center before we click out, and now we'll look down and everything's centered. If you did have a problem and it didn't center, you need to go back. Simply hit the Shift key from the top and then hit End on your side keyboard. Hit End and down arrow, and it instantly highlights that. You don't have to use the mouse, click and drag. And then you could reformat. Say I want it on the left, put it on the left, move it on the other side, but I like it centered. Centered doesn't interfere with the other numbers. Alright, our payment is going to be different every month. Our principal is going to be the same every month. So let's start our table by pulling up the principal amount. We can use that because it's never going to change. Format it. Let's just do a comma. There we go. And we can't take it down just yet because we don't have the items to the side to tell the autofill function how far to go. But that's no problem. Let's build the whole first line and we'll do it down all at once. The interest is calculated in the same fashion. You start with the balance from the prior month using a relative address, which is up 1 and 2 to the right. You do a relative address by not using your named variable. There's no $ in there. So E19 is a relative address, and we're going to multiply that times the interest rate, which is an absolute address. Interest rate is going to be the same through the whole thing. And we have to divide that by 12 so that we're only taking a month worth of interest instead of a year. So there's our interest amount for the first month. Format that. And our payment is going to be the interest plus the principal. So there's our payment, interest, and principal. And of course the balance is going to go down very similar to the last one. It's just the balance less the principal. So there's our new balance. So now we click and drag all of the formulas. It's all formatted, everything looks good. Double click, and there's our table. And if we go down, click out of the box. If we go down to the bottom, there should be a 0 there. That shows that we did it right. Now we're going to add a couple formatting tips this time. Let's see, let's make that one an accounting, and we'll just make the first 3 lines accounting. I had some people say that I was against $signs. I'm not against $signs. There we go. There's your $signs. And then the other issue that I would like you to build into this spreadsheet is the ability to hide or unhide data. So if somebody wants a report, oh, and that reminds me, we have to put our file footer. So let's go over to the file and let's look at how good it fills up the page. Let's go and put a footer on it. So we go to our page layout, print titles will work, or you can use this arrow box here, the page setup box. Let's just try print titles. It says header footer. Now let's do a custom footer. We'll put it in the center. Path and file. That I just clicked on the insert file path button. Hit OK. So there it goes, and it's so long that it looks like it's going to do that. So we'll hit OK, and let's go back up to our page and see what happens. There we go. Go home. Now in this test, once you've completed this, let's say that your loan period changes. It has to be functional for a 30-year loan. I'm going to look and make sure that you did it big enough so that if I put 30, I can see everything. But I'm going to show you a way to hide data that the user doesn't need to see. So let's say that our loan period was 5 years. Hit enter. Let's just say we bought a car, for example, and the car was a $50,000 car, and the finance company wanted 10% up front, and our interest rate's the same, 5. So if you look at the table here, and you come down, here is where it turns to 0. You see that dash? That's the same as a 0. If it doesn't say 0, that's perfectly acceptable. But we want to hide all of this other information. And there's a group function that you can use. So go through here and select all of the cells that you don't need to see. And go to Data, this is the Data ribbon, and go over to the Group button. It's also Shift-Alt-Right. If I click on the group, then what happens, it asks me rows, and you're going to want rows. It puts something here to the side. And click out of it. It's been grouped. If you go to the bottom of your, and you type on that minus, it shrinks it all up so the user doesn't see it. And so now what prints out is just a simple loan table that goes to 0. That, I think, is a cleaner presentation, and it shows you how to use the group function. So now let's say you're going to get another number, and you need to put in, say, a 10-year loan. Now you need to see that data. So come down here and go back up to where you started the group from the last presentation of data. That's line 80. Select it, and down, and this time go up and ungroup it, clean it up, and then take and go down to where your table zeroes out, which is right here, and take every line below it, group rows, and go to the bottom, and hit the minus. And that way, all that you're showing your user is what the user needs to see. Everything looks good, looks spaced. Let's double check and see if it passes the $10 million rule. $10 million is probably something that's in the realm of possibility, and it doesn't pass. We were just a little bit too narrow. So by checking this, you can go up here between the E and the F, double click, and it automatically stretches E out just enough to handle that big number. That's an essential formatting step. We want to make sure that even though our typical numbers may be small, that the columns are big enough to handle what the user might throw at it. Let's see here if there's anything else we can do. Yes, this purpose box, something has caused it to be incorrect. So let's highlight on it, and let's go back to our home page, and it looks like it was formatted to the bottom of the cell. If we put it to the top, and then we click between the 4 and 5, there we go. Okay, and finally, before you turn in any work, go to the Review tab, hit Spelling. Yes, it's good. I've got my file footer. I've got my numbers right. I've got anything hidden that doesn't need to be there. And remember, I expect this spreadsheet to be able to handle 30 years. But if I ask you to then include a group function to hide anything other than a number of years, you need to be prepared to do that. That is your number 2. I believe that now you're learning how the preparation of these spreadsheets can be sped up. If you have any questions, please email your professor. And I would appreciate any heads up if you think there's something we could do to make these videos more easy for you to understand. I'm happy to redo it. I'm happy to do a second video maybe that would specialize on any portion of what we've done with this spreadsheet. But if you have any feedback, I'd be happy to read it. That's it in less than a half hour. Good luck, prepare, practice, and we're going to set the test for probably within a week after the exam number 1. So watch in structure for the test date, and that'll give me some time to go over the results from the first test and get you ready to go.